Turn on your, all right, we're good to go? All right, thank you. All right, thank you everyone for being here. It is 5:30 on May the 10th, 2022, and I'm calling the Sugar Land Parks Board meeting to an order. So the first item we have on here on the agenda is the public comments. Trish, do we have anyone for public comments?
No, we don't.
Okay.
Are they?
They're part of the first one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just kind of making sure y'all didn't have any public comments. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. The next item on the actual agenda we have is the fact finding and recommendation for consideration and of action on the recommendation of the Shape Up Fort Bend appeal for fee exemption for the use of city facilities for the city manager. Kimberly will be presenting. Thank you very much.
So all of our fees and our rental fees, any of our recreation fees are set up by ordinance, the ordinance with city council. The city council adopts that annually. In August 2005, the Parks Board approved the foundation for the fee exemption policy, and that went into effect on January 1st, 2006. So the criteria for fee exemption is that you have to be an internal revenue service exempt entity, like a 501c3. You must reside or have a PO box in the corporate city limits of Sugar Land. You must demonstrate that a minimum of 51% of the membership reside in those Sugar Land corporate city limits. You must have a charitable purpose and must demonstrate that the fundraiser is for the express benefit of Sugar Land residents. So Shape Up Fort Bend submitted a fee exemption request. They have an event coming up in October, the first annual vintage car show. That was denied the exemption for the following reasons, and really that's just that the organizational address is in Richmond. If you're familiar with a lot of 501c3s, the organization's address tends to follow the chair, or an organization may not have a physical address. But they have indicated that they are acquiring a Sugar Land PO box. If they have a PO box, that of course would meet those requirements. So through this appeal process, an organization that is denied the exemption may appeal by submitting a request for review by the Parks Board, and you should have that letter in your packet. The board reviews that appeal and makes a recommendation for the city manager. And tonight we have board members from Shape Up Fort Bend in attendance if y'all have any questions for them. And I'll take any questions and open it up for discussion. I would like, so Shape Up Fort Bend, you have been able to acquire the PO box for your organization, correct? So since they've acquired that PO box, they would currently meet then all of the qualification requirements for fee exemption.
Any questions or comments from anyone?
If they
Joe?
meet the requirements for the exemption, wouldn't we make a motion then that we?
Well, based on, yes, I guess I would be the action item.
So, right, I think this is set up as a workshop. Joe,
No,
so
it's
I'm
an
not
action
sure.
item.
It's an action, yes, so
Yes.
yes, there need to be a recommendation in that.
So if they meet the requirements for the exemption, I make a motion that we exempt them from the, is that correct?
Is that gonna be the recommendation from the?
Yes.
Make a
Okay.
motion. Make a motion to approve the exemption.
Yeah, and then then the city would take that, take
Okay,
whatever your decision is to the city manager.
Okay, so
I make a motion.
Joan's gonna make a motion. Second, Andy,
Excuse me.
all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm so in back.
Other online said I too.
Okay. All right, any, objections? So I guess the ayes have it. Thank you very much. I guess,
Would Shape Up Fort Bend like to give you the opportunity, came up this way, would you like to make any comments to the board?
would y'all want to talk a little bit more about your organization?
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, we're excited about it.
My name is Dr. Blomstrom, and I am the chair of Shape Up Fort Bend. And we're excited. The event is actually an inaugural vintage car show, and it will be at the park. And we are hoping to invite at least 275 people with cars. The people with antique cars are very happy to show their cars. So we have contacted some of them. And it will be October the 22nd. And it's actually a family event because Shape Up Fort Bend is about promoting health. And if the community is healthy, then so is the city. So we will have a fun time activity for children. We promote health across the lifespan. So we will have an activities for children, for senior adults, and for the middle adults, different kinds of age-appropriate activities besides the car show. And we'll have vendors, which of course we are contacting vendors from Sugar Land. All of the people that are going to be involved will be from Sugar Land. So hopefully that we'll have a very successful October 22nd.
And it's at Brazos.
Okay, thank you. That's my question.
You got it? Okay, any questions?
Okay, thank you.
It'll be a fun thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hopefully good weather.
Yeah, hopefully good weather.
Cooler weather.
I think there's a rain date on the calendar.
All right, with that being said, I guess we'll get that on record for the approval of the permit. Next item we have on here, item number 4, workshop. A review of and discussion of the Trust for Public Lands Park Score Rating System. Tricia, thank you very much for coming. We'll be presenting.
I did not expect that to go so easily. I'm delighted that it was. So I was like, oh man, I'm coming up. Good evening, Parks Board. And thank you for taking your time out to listen to me talk about the Trust for Public Land Park Score. You might not know what that is, and that's because we've never really talked about it in a Parks Board meeting. So this is something new that we haven't discussed before, but we have been working on it behind the scenes for about 2.5 years now, and we are excited to show you our progress. So you might be wondering what the heck that is. I'm going to give you some background information. So the Trust for Public Land is a national nonprofit, and you can look them up at tpl.org. It's a national nonprofit organization that aims to help create parks and protect public land for people, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. Obviously, we resonate very much with that mission, so we're already off to a good start. TPL works with communities across the country to ensure that everyone has a great park within about 10 minutes of their residence. So one of TPL's main focuses is for all people to have access to a park just 10 minutes from their homes. And they say 10 minutes because when TPL initially asked the top 100, the 100 largest cities in the US, the majority responded that living close to a park would be considered about half mile with public roads and sidewalk access, or 10 minutes. And parks encourage physical activity, they promote overall wellness. We all know this, but that's why TPL stresses this, because they really do want to ensure that there are close to home opportunities to exercise and experience the outdoors because they're so essential for our physical and mental well-being. The importance, a large part of it is placemaking. Parks provide destinations for people to gather together, AKA i.e. our Parks event series, our Food Truck Friday events that really are hosted at multiple parks throughout the year. And that's a great way for people to come together. It helps to enhance neighborhood sense of community. And it's a great way to determine what neighborhoods are in greater need of a park compared to others. So the PARCS database, it was launched as the PARCS score system 10 years ago, but they launched the PARCS serve system in 2018. For each city, town, and community, geographic boundaries were obtained from the census. The TPL team attempted to contact each city, town, and community with a request for their parks data. And if that wasn't provided, they would create GIS data for the place based on available resources, such as park information from municipal websites, GIS data available from counties and states, and satellite imagery. So as I mentioned before, the park score criteria is granted to the largest 100 cities. Beyond the park score index, TPL's data compiles park acreage and access information for 14,000 cities, including the city of Sugar Land. And obviously Sugar Land is not included in the park score system. Houston is, and we'll get to a little bit of that data later. But the park score criteria has 14 measures across 5 categories: acreage, investment, amenities, access, and equity. And kind of based off of the pandemic in 2021, the equity criteria was added. So what kind of parks does the PARCS database include? So publicly owned local, state, and national parks, trails, and open space, school parks with a joint use agreement with the local government, privately owned parks that are managed for full public use, and parks that are not able to be included in the PARCS database are parks in gated communities, or parks that have clear boundaries or gates, private golf courses and cemeteries, school parks and playgrounds that do not have active joint use agreements, and zoos, museums, and professional sports stadiums. This is kind of a sample of what you would see if you went on to tpl.org and you went to a city's overall website. You'd see the percentage of residents within a 10-minute walk or a park, and you see the percent of age. It covers by income, by race, ethnicity, and it also covers the overall percentage of city land that's used for parks and recreation. So overall, it really does provide a bird's eye view of what's needed in what neighborhoods, and that's really great for our strategic plan as well. So that brings us to Sugar Land status. When we started in 2019, the database showed that 38% of Sugar Land residents lived within a 10-minute walk of park. And when Joe first saw that, he knew that that was inaccurate. Now, they did include all of our city parks, but what they didn't show was other city-owned, just undeveloped parkland, green space, HOA parks, which are a huge part of the percentage, and school playgrounds and parks. So we went to work on inputting that data. And I'd also like to give a shout out before I forget that Funland was a huge part of helping me find that. It was definitely a team effort, but Funland did a lot of the legwork in helping me find this data. So it's important to note that, oh, I already said that all of our city parks were in the system already. There were a few that weren't, but overall it was the aforementioned HOA parks and other green space, et cetera. So over the last 2 years, we have been working to input this data. And I want to kind of give you a background on what that sounds like, because it sounds pretty easy, just like, oh, it's missing a park. Let me just type in the address, la-di-da. Not quite that simple, unfortunately. It's not hard, it's just, there's a lot of steps to it. So first of all, we had some delays because over the last 2 years, TPL has been through a lot of changes. They totally revamped their website. They went through a whole rebranding, and they were also trying to update their database to be as user-friendly as possible for when people are trying to input the data. And so that did sort of result in a delay for us, and there would be some times where we'd input data and it wouldn't be inputted for whatever reason, it wouldn't be recognized. It would just say error message, which was obviously going to cause a delay. And you know, the pandemic obviously did not help with delayed response times from the TPL staff. But we managed and we got some progress. We got 40% in January 2020, a whopping 2% more. I was thrilled because I had kept seeing these error messages. And so when I finally saw that we had a little bit of increase, I was very excited. So the process, I'm just going to go back. There are a lot of pieces of information that are needed in order for the TPL staff to kind of validate this data. So they ask questions like, what is the name of the park? Which honestly, sometimes on Google Maps, there's a different name than what the HOA park calls it, which was a different name than what was in our master plan. So we just had to get all that correlated and really make everything consistent. So some of the information that they required is who's the local owner and manager. So we had to just go in. It just took a little bit of research, but we had to determine who the HOA was or who the manager was, when the park was built, which sometimes took a little bit of time. What's the address? Sometimes even that is challenging because it's just a name of a street corner. So there's little challenges here and there, and just took a few steps. So as I said, in January 2020, we had 40%, and we kept on chugging along. In May 2020, we had 52%, which was awesome. And then the real game changer happened when we were able to confirm to TPL that we had a joint use agreement with the Fort Bend ISD schools, elementary schools, that allows for public use of the parks on weekends and after school hours. So that good news, as well as all the other HOA parks that we had been adding during this time, made our recent percentage go up nearly 30%, and TPL now shows us that 80% of Sugar Land residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. And that is where we're at right now. We still have, I'd like to thank Finland. So that's very exciting. I still feel like we have a little bit more work to do, especially because just comparing our spreadsheet that had all the information and our status updates, there were still a few parks that weren't included. So I'll talk about those next steps in a moment, but I did want to touch upon the nearby comparisons. So Houston, because it's one of the top largest and one of the 100 largest cities, it's kind of graded differently, so it looks a little bit differently. It is currently number 70. In 2021, it was number 77, and now it is number 70 of the top scored cities. And then we have Stafford, that is 40%. Missouri City, that's 51%. Of course, Houston is 60%. Katie's at 35, Alton shows 33, and Rosenberg is at 30. And it's important to note that these do not necessarily reflect the accuracy, but it shows what TPL was able to acquire as far as information of their parks data. But it's also doubly important to note that we are in the lead regardless. In the Fort Bend area, which is always kind of what we want. So the next steps are to just resubmit the data that we might have submitted before that they, for some reason, didn't accept, or some error message that happened, and just analyze that, that data. Continue to reassess public parkland and HOA parks to see if there are any updates to amenities or public access, et cetera. And evaluate the map, as I said, for improvements to the data and any inconsistencies that are on the map. So with that, I would like to open the floor up for questions if you have any. Ho-Jin?
So that's great. 80% is awesome. So hopefully others won't update theirs. Now that the competition out there, maybe they will. So my question is, how did y'all find this website, and are we using this as a information source we could kind of share with the residents, saying, hey guys, this is the organization TPL that's actually provided this information to show that we're showing 80% of the people kind of really boasting about Sugar Land.
Right. I mean, that's the goal, really, right? To talk about how great we are and how we have a lot of parks. But as far as discovering the website, I'm gonna defer to Joe on that, because he was kind of the one that came up to us during the staff meeting and said, I know that we've got more than 38%, so let's work on this. So Joe?
Trust for Public Lands. Most y'all have heard of Trust for Public Lands before now, haven't you? You've not? Oh, okay. Maybe it's an insider thing. But they've been an organization that's been around for a pretty long time, and I think they focus on not just city parks, but just park, whether it's national or state or just promoting utilization or availability of parkland. They're a national kind of recognized organization for that. It's just a park advocate group. And so that I would say that in our fund, they're a pretty well-respected organization that really looks broadly over the whole country and trends and things going on in parks and trying to, increase availability of parkland. So I had just known about it forever, pretty much. So when they started this up, like Tricia showed, they haven't been doing this all that long. And
Right.
so this is still a relatively recent thing that they've started doing. And so when we looked it up and saw theirs on there, I was like, this, 38%, that can't be right. I know we're better than that. So, we Tricia and Von Linskar are looking at the criteria for it and seeing what had to be done and, learned about what they had to input and everything like that. And so it's been an ongoing process that we'll look up information. And we had quite a bit of information on the HOA and private parks because of going through our master plan. There's a significant inventory that's done. So we really we don't want to be recreating things if they're already out there. If an HOA is providing it in a certain spot, we don't want to recreate it. We want to fill in where the gaps are, or make sure there's people out there. And as you can see, we're still missing 20% of our area. What we've gotten from that is it still looks like they're looking at areas like the business park where, obviously nobody lives there. So we feel like part of our ongoing effort to kind of fully, realize this is to figure out how did they really consider that? Like, since there's not homes there, but there's businesses there, to meet that goal, do we need to have a park within like the business park area? And there's a couple of other areas. I think even the airport shows up on there as something maybe, although they do have a little park at the
We added
airport,
that, we were
which
able
we've
to add
added,
that.
so that we've added that. So it went in their map, they show the green areas are good. That's everybody that's served by a park. And then there's purple areas. So you can identify it.
Don't want the
And
color
you don't want to
purple.
see the
Don't
purple
want
areas,
purple,
especially
yeah.
not the dark purple areas.
Yeah.
And so, we can really see from their map, okay, they're not giving us credit for anything here in this purple zone. So that was also part of the effort was, okay, let's figure out what is in there and see if we can get credit for it. So that's how we really made probably the big jumps from like 50 to 80. It's like really looking at where were they not giving us credit for these parks. So, I don't know that there's hardly anything that has, 100%. There may be somewhere, but 80 is really high. If you go through and you can look at all the different cities, and 80 is really getting up there. There's very, very few in the state of Texas that are going to be at that level. Woodlands, I think, is one of the few that probably still exceeds that number.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I did forget to mention that the approval process, they don't accept the changes until about like every 6 months. So unfortunately, we don't see just instant gratification, instant approval. It takes some time for them to make that update. So that's kind of a little bit of the struggle as well, is having to look back after 6 months and be like, okay, what did they approve and what did they overlook and how can we fix that?
Great.
Hey, Kelsey.
You mentioned that there's a list of the 100 largest US cities. I guess, that's just by population size, but
Yes.
what are, in terms of like what Joe was saying, around 80% is really good. Is there a target that we're trying to hit, or just to get as high as we can get?
I mean, TPL of course advocates for 100% of residents being able to have a park within 10 minutes. So at the end of the day, that's what our goal is too. And maybe we'll get there in like, 2080 or something, but there are some roadblocks such as the awesome golf courses that we have that they don't offer that they don't allow private golf courses, of course, to be part of that score. So
we kind of get hurt in areas like around Sugar Creek and around Sweetwater. for those residences because they're served by the country club there, but we can't count that. So, yeah, there's some challenges like that. I just don't know that we'd ever be able to overcome really.
But it is interesting because if you go to the 100 largest cities and you look at the data, they're not really at 100%. Some of them are at 90, some of them are at 75, but it's they're tying in all those other criteria, like equity and what kind of amenities and I guess accessibility to those amenities and stuff. So that's kind of, they use that criteria to help with our score as well. I mean, it's very getting into the weeds, and I'm not a data analyst of TPL, so I don't know for sure, but I mean, I know that they said that's kind of part of it. They use that same criteria.
The map that you see currently with TPL in terms of map of Sugarland, and you know, because we're locals here, you know, like, okay, well, the airport, what can we do about the airport? But are there legitimate areas that the city of Sugarland Parks would be looking to maybe construct new parks?
There definitely are, and there are a few HOA parks in very needed areas that have great amenities. Unfortunately, they are gated to the public. And I mean, that's kind of one of those things where we're like, maybe down the road, we can like, you know, hey, HOA guys, you wanna open up your gates? Because, you know, Joe and I have had these conversations of like, it's not like someone from, you know, Dallas is gonna say, oh my gosh, we want this one neighborhood, we gotta go to that park, that's a huge destination. So like, there's not a huge liability there, we don't think, but it's still up to them at the end of the day. So we can only do what we can do. But I mean, I think that it's definitely great to see the purple areas, the zones where there's not a lot of green space, because we could make a tiny parklet out of just a corner or something. And that's something that the city has done. The city made a parklet at Williams Trace, which is amazing. And it's not exactly the same thing, but I mean, these are definitely ways to tell council of the places that we really need to provide access for all of our residents.
So if I may expound on this information that you're presenting us, is this something that we could use as part of some grants that we could go after? Because I know that there's, from what I remember, there may be some grants that presents to certain cities with certain amount of amenities such as parks that are offered, and you know, these federal grants could provide funding for maintenance or anything else that's needed to update these or keep the actual maintenance up on all these different parks. Is that something that y'all could use, or is part of this trust?
We generally we're looking for grants a lot of times, and a lot of times what I find in the grants, especially for parks, is they look almost the opposite. Is they look for underserved areas.
Okay.
And so if we had a lower income area that was underserved, that would probably make us more desirable for grants. We're in a fortunate position that we have very little of that situation. So most of our across the board neighborhoods from the lower income to up to probably some of the highest level of income is pretty well covered. But like we always look for grants, whether it's we've gotten, you know, from smaller grants like wildflower pollinator seeding grants to tree grants to bigger park grants. We generally are always on the lookout for whatever, and we'll use any kind of data that we can to try to help us achieve those grants.
Okay.
Yeah, even just a couple of, I think it was a couple of years ago, I tried a playground grant application. And then they asked for what's the average household income for this area. And then when I talk to those people and then tell them the general data, they just know we're not going, I mean, you're not going to be qualified. So
We make too much money.
Yeah, it's a good point. In a way, yeah. So okay, we'll keep plugging away at it, and those areas, if we can, like when we did our Parks Rec and Open Space Master Plan a few years ago, we identified Sugar Creek as sort of an area that isn't totally covered within our half mile, because we try to achieve the half mile radius if there's not something in there. But when you get into a built out area, that's, you know, it's a totally built out neighborhood, there's just like no land available. You know, there's just nothing available. There is one small neighborhood park in Sugar Creek, but it's way at the far end where the pool, the neighborhood pool is.
Yeah.
It's kind of at the far end. So you get part of the neighborhood that meets that, but then you get probably the bulk of the neighborhoods down closer to the country club away from it. So a lot of the neighborhood's not, you know, not in proximity to that. That's
And
kind
and you get yelled at by the golf course if you try to
of.
walk around.
Yeah.
The kids are always getting yelled at because they try to ride their bikes.
So tempting, it looks like.
It is
Park
so-
paths look like a sidewalk, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's so
they get in
smooth.
so much trouble.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for Tricia. She's really been like staying on top of TPL and tracking them down. And then also Cullinan for providing a lot of the specific data for the locations and trying to track them down. And we had some kids, some well, they weren't interns, they were just summer helpers, summer workers that we had last summer. We put them to work on this last summer and, you
They
know,
were paid by Fort Bend County.
yeah, they were paid, yeah, Fort Bend County paid them, so we put them to work like studying, you know, whether it was Google Earth Maps or
They were looking at,
county
Fort Bend
appraisal
County,
district maps and all that sort of
Google
thing.
Earth, and our GIS data and the TPL map. So
Yeah.
they basically had a headache.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it was
And plus with HOA parks that are new, like Kimberly pointed out, some in the Imperial neighborhood, which is a pretty new development. So when you go into Google Earth, there's no presence, there's nothing established for those parks. And so I'd go out there and take a bunch of pictures, like, look at these whole playground equipment. Then I went in and I added it as an edit into Google, and you have to wait for that to be accepted. And then you go to TPL to say, hey, this is a legitimate park, because we know that they're legitimate, but TPL obviously doesn't. So if they go to Google and they're like, there's no information anywhere about this part, they're just lying through their teeth. Obviously, that's not ideal. So we just want to give them as much evidence as we can to show that there is a park in that area. And I do think that those help. So thanks.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
It does.
I attended a conference a couple of weeks ago. It's our professional organization of landscape architects. One of the keynote speakers was a guy that was the Parks Commissioner for the city of New York. And part of his presentation had to do with New York's TPL walk score. And so, and he said, like, when he got there, they had a really high walk score on this, but he was like, he started showing us examples of like what qualified in New York City, and it'd be like a asphalt slab with a chain link fence around it, and it would have like one bench and maybe a tree like poking up out of the asphalt, you know, on maybe a
Green
quarter acre lot or whatever. And he said, we were getting credit for these, and he had a couple of different examples of it. And he goes, but we just knew this was not acceptable, and so they went and spent like $900 million to fix up their park system, to fix these kind of places up. And so he showed examples of what they had done. So,
Hey, that's really
but I
respectable
felt
though,
pretty
because other
good.
people
Just
would be like, all right, we got it.
Sometimes we would be talking like, well, it's green space and it's a bench and there's a tree and it looks like a walkway by some water. I don't know if it really qualified, but then after I saw that, I was like, yeah, everything that we have shown is legit green space and a legit park, and that's not an asphalt slab. So
Yeah.
Would the trails along the bayous also be considered?
The green belts are hard to, they're just kind of hard to measure.
Come on, be like New York.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely
That was one
something
thing we
that
kind of
we,
talked about,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we focused really on these, like the defined park spaces.
yeah, but now that we're kind of at the tip, now that we've kind of reached that 80%, we're like, well, what are things that we can go into that are a little bit more in detail?
I mean, the
Yeah.
trails along the bayous, they do have trailheads, and it is accessible to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah.
For the.
They do have some that are included, so we just have to take a look at all of them and see.
Maybe because it is
What we
part
could
of
add
our
to
system
Exactly,
now.
right, it's exactly, yeah. it's hard to really understand exactly how they quantify those, like in the space, and like where does it? You would think anything within 10 minutes of that trail
Yeah.
should count.
I know.
You know,
Yeah.
so, well, that's something we'll continue to look at.
I feel like Trish and I wanted to drop off the block party trailer in Austin Park neighborhood. There's a golf course right there, but they had this little strip that was between the golf.
I was
course and
so
the road.
excited. I was like, I'm gonna take a picture of that.
Wasn't part of the golf course, it was adjacent to the golf course, same grass, you know, but it had benches and was along a sidewalk, like, well, this is public access, this is a. this
It
a
is,
park.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even though you wouldn't recognize it from looking at an aerial or looking at Google or any of that.
Right.
You wouldn't recognize it as a separate park, but just driving by there, being by there, we can identify it as a.
By
park space.
HOA's little strip, they just didn't know what to do with it, so just made it into a little.
Yeah, they're like, we
accessible
have
area.
extra land, here's a bench.
Yes.
Which happens all the time. I mean, I've been in developments, they do that. And this is why I brought up the trails and the ditches, because there's trailheads on there all the time. I mean,
Yeah,
It's probably a
The
little
one at-
difficult to get your addresses and names and things like
Right,
that, which
yeah.
makes it a little more challenging.
okay.
but now that we've got, we can go more in depth for these and this next update, I think.
We've already hit the landmark of 80%.
Oh, no, we're not giving up. We are gonna keep going.
It's a massive effort.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort that y'all put in. Appreciate the
Yes.
presentation. That was great.
Next
Thank you.
update, next year.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Next item I have on here is the director's report for Mr. Joe Treasure, Director of Parks and Rec.
Are you controlling or am I?
You are.
I'm controlling now. Okay, there it is. Every year the city does a volunteer of the year for various departments in the city. And so Parks, we get, I think we're the only department that actually has 2 volunteers of the year. We are the only one. And so we get 1 volunteer of the year specifically for the T.E. Harmon Senior Center. And this year it was Amy Sewell was our volunteer of the year for the senior center. And she's a very impressive lady. She's retired from Shell Oil and she was a VP of projects and technology. She endowed a scholarship at A&M for electrical and computer engineering students. She's a member of our Sugarland 4B Corporation board as well. So very, very accomplished woman. And what she does at the senior center is she's kind of the techie person, the IT person for all the seniors. And so she'll make herself available, have a class to help seniors out with, any kind of computer issue that they have, whether it's their phone or their laptop or whatever type of technology issue that they could, bring to her. She can help them out with that. And she often stays beyond her allotted time to do that, just to make sure that they're well taken care of there at the senior center. So she was recognized as our senior of the year from the T.E. Harmon Senior Center. And then Amaris, I'm pronouncing that right? Okay, Amaris, she is a student volunteer and works in the park system. And she's also a very accomplished young lady too. She's the salutatorian at Clements High School. And she's also, she's kind of an accomplished dancer as well as a strong student. She's primarily, her focus has been on environmental efforts for pollinator seeding. She's Farmland's go-to volunteer for all the things related to reforestation projects and the seeding projects. And if you got a chance to go through Brazos River Park on the new road that we kept showing you all the progress on, through the efforts of Farmland and volunteer staff, the wildflowers have really starting to take off there, really propagating there. And they don't just automatically happen, by themselves on land that's been disturbed like that. It takes some help. us helping Mother Nature along there. And so this year, we really saw a big boost in our number of bluebonnets along the road. And what happens is they reseed every year. So that each year you should have more and more the following year. We also had like Indian paintbrush, started seeing more Indian paintbrush. Okay. And then like right now it's black-eyed Susans. You're really starting to see a lot of those really nice sweeps of yellow there. So she was our volunteer for all of that. And so I guess, is she graduating?
She's graduating this year.
Okay, and going on, okay. But actually we had students 2 years in a row that were volunteers of the year that helped out on all those projects. I don't know who we're gonna have for next year.
Actually, one of the reasons is also she not only does the volunteer herself, but also she recruited on Google. So I already see among the other students, like ninth grade and 10th grade, some volunteers also are rising up to be the next part. So it kind of become a succession plan already.
Yeah.
So each year they sort of the senior teaches the younger student, and then after they graduate, other students step up. So very impressive leadership too.
So our tree planting annual program always, we try to recruit high school kids for that. So it kind of brings them out, gets them out into nature, they learn something about planting trees, about reforestation, and hopefully that'll leave an impression on them for their future. A public art ribbon cutting was held a couple of weeks ago. You might recognize Heather in the picture. Heather, I don't know if you're still on the call, but it was a really
Hello.
good review of it looks posed. It looked like a professional photographer was there to take this a family photo there. So basically, this was an art element that was added to Lonnie Green Park. It's an artist that works with like recycling propane tanks. And Joan, you were on the jury for this. So is there anything you wanted to add?
Well, his name is Crush, and it seats up to 6 people. And, it was a unanimous vote for this. There was a spider and two spiders, and there were ants. And this was just the greatest because, we actually have crocodiles and alligators in Oyster Creek. So it was a great bunch of choices, but this was unanimously the favorite of the people on the board with me. His name is Orange Crush.
Yes. And Kimberly and Brianna and staff organized the ribbon cutting. This was a kind of a joint project between Parks and the Economic Development Department here in the city. It was arts funds that went to pay for this.
And we did have Orange Crush sodas.
And that's what's in their hand is Orange Crush soda. That was the theme of the.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
And then in the keeping with ribbon cutting ceremonies, we completed the Eagle Plaza. If you'll recall, this is the Plaza Memorial Park. We've had donors providing funds. First for the eagle sculpture that you can see on the hill back here. And then we came and added the seat walls. It's sort of an amphitheater seat walls in a small plaza area. This was from Colonel Bala and family, who donated $100,000 through the Legacy Foundation. And then we also had some additional donors donate money through the Legacy Foundation to complete the project. And so this was going back many years when we identified the park as being a memorial park, identified various locations within the park to construct these memorials. And so this is the third of 4 memorials that were identified back in that master planning of the park. So definitely making progress there. And the quote that was on the brick wall, or not the brick wall, the concrete wall here, that's sandblasted in. And that was we offered a number of quotes for the donor to select from, and that's the quote that they selected.
What's it say, Joe?
It says, "We seek peace, knowing that peace is the climate of freedom," and that was a Dwight Eisenhower
Nice.
quote.
Very nice.
Great. And then Our department, we had really nothing to do with the roadway, but we Kimberly, Brian managed the ribbon cutting. So we're taking credit for all of Highway 6, the improvements to Highway 6. If you have a complaint about Highway 6, not us, but if you love it, it's us, okay? Okay, and I know that we've also kept you really posted on the bridges at Cullinan Park over the years. So we're happy to announce that they just got finished last week. They're open, people are crossing them. We were out there today. There was a couple dog walking and a hiker, there were several hikers. And if you run across them already, okay, well, you're legal now. So you're good. And so William really headed up this project with the Gulf Coast Water Authority and the city's engineering department. And it had a series of very unique challenges that made it a project that took a lot of effort and work. Not to get too much into the engineering details, but when GCWA designed it, they designed it at a certain elevation. But when we went to build it, we took it through the city's drainage department. They said, no, it's got to be like way up above the level of the creek. And so once it got moved up to be 18 inches above the base flood elevation, whatever all the technical term is, it ended up being way up in the air. When it was built, it was about 6 on some of those various locations, like here, and then on the other side, it was about 8 feet above what the natural grade was. So that all had to be built up. And so dirt was brought in from various other construction projects around the city. It was graded off, built up. William and staff had to do some additional work to make the transitions at the bridge. You can see the limestone transitions at the bridge, and also to do some fairly significant drainage work. There were some big culverts that had to go in. You can't see them in the picture, but culverts and pipes probably, round pipe, 4 feet on one side, and then several others on the other side. So it was a significant project. But what it did was, there's 750 acres at Cullinan Park, but it was split by Oyster Creek and Red Gully. So you were really limited to just about barely a third of that acreage. Now it's accessible to the whole 750 acres of the park. Not that people will be able to get into all of it, but there are trails in those areas so people can get out there and explore these other areas. And then on the right is the mountain bike trails that were, as you recall, y'all were very involved in the agreements with the mountain biker group, and we're glad to say that they've really abided by all the rules. They've been very diligent in working with us when they develop any additional trails. This one we came to the board and talked about before. It completed a couple of loops. You can see the lake here, and then Brazos River Park over here in the bowl. And so they had one way down. They created a couple of loops here to get all the way back. So it added, how many miles did it add?
About 3 miles.
About 3 miles of new trail. And one of the really exciting things about this is this coming weekend, they're hosting a kind of region, almost statewide bike race out there. So they're kind of, the idea of this was make it a destination here in Sugar Land. So they're hosting, in conjunction with the Greater Houston Off-Road Mountain Bike Association, a pretty significant race out here. And they're going to do a kind of a family day on Saturday, practices and kind of some bike related education things with kids on Saturday, and then competitive races on Sunday. So pretty exciting thing to have come to Sugar Land. And we're hoping this is the beginning of many. We hope they have a real success.
And it's all one-way trails now, so it's a lot safer than having two-way. So it's all one flow, counterclockwise. So it's much, much safer.
And a couple of other projects that we've talked to the board about quite a bit over the last probably year is the bicycle pump track that's proposed for the Crown Festival Park. We had a long time getting through agreements with the University of Houston system on being able to construct this. They just didn't understand it, I think. they didn't understand the project and they just, you know, we were trying to get an agreement with them that just said, this is what we're building. Since we leased the property, I think I've talked about that before. We leased the property. So, and some stipulations as to what we build there, the university has like to be notified and has to kind of approve it. So it took a long time to get through the process of an agreement with U of H. They finally signed off on it. And then we're ready to go. We awarded a contract just a couple of weeks ago to the company that had provided our preliminary design. They're a design build type company. So they're doing the final design, and then their plan is to start a little later in the summer. You know what they said, late summer, to try to be complete by the fall of this year. And then the other activity that we've talked to you about, had a presentation on, was the Go Ape treetop climbing ropes course zip line for Brazos River Park. And so finally came to agreement with the Go Ape company on that, and we took that to city council. They approved that agreement. So they're moving forward with final design right now. And their time frame looks like trying to start also kind of, well, they're going to start in the fall with a planned completion by the end of the year, and certainly final completion by the end of the year and opening early in 2023. So those are two exciting projects that are going to bring even more interest and visibility to the Brazos River Park area. Everybody's favorite park in the city pretty much is Oyster Creek Park. And that's mostly because we have the really beautiful water feature there. But when the water gets full of silt and other kind of debris, it starts to clog up the pumps. And so we were starting to see the pumps kind of going up and down and causing some problems. And if the pumps start doing that, you can burn out the pumps. So William and staff, primarily Jorge and Matt, our superintendent and field supervisor, recognized the need to kind of shut it down. They looked at, see what was going on. They looked at the bottom basin. The bottom basin is where everything goes to. And so the water there is picked up there and pumped back up. So when it started clogging up, that was a problem. So they drained it all out and saw probably almost knee deep in sludge, basically. And the sludge, it's not anything that we can control. It's just, it's nature doing its thing. Leaves drop down in there from the surrounding trees. And as the trees got bigger, they drop more leaves. So it just gets filled, then the leaves decompose and they just basically turn into a sludge more or less. And so over time, it just kind of builds up. It's not really so much litter or debris in there. It's just kind of vegetative matter that decomposes and turns into that. So they had to dig it out, pump it out, just do a lot of cleaning, power washing it just to get it cleaned out. And so they got it all done about 3 weeks ago now. I wanted to make sure it was done in time for senior pictures and all the other things that people do. They love to take pictures out there. So it's all back up and running, and the way the fountain's running now, I haven't seen it run that good in years. So it's all in really, really good shape. So if you get a chance to get by there, you can see what the dirty work looked like to make it look so nice now. And then, just as every year's tradition, we open the pool on Memorial Day weekend. It's all good to go. You may have been seeing signs up in the neighborhoods, lifeguards wanted and things, but we contract with a company that provides lifeguards for us. They haven't told us there were any issues with them getting lifeguards, so I think we're in good shape. And then it's kind of a special event wrap up. I know some of the board members were able to make it out to the International Art and Kite Festival. This is one of our, we've done the tracking. It's called Placer AI. It's a service that the city uses to track how many people are at a given event or a location or in a park at a certain time. So we use that data this time, and they came back with about, was it 7,500 to 8,500 people that came to the event. And our comment on that was, well, half the people there were kids that were probably young enough not to even have a cell phone. So how do we count them? So we think it was somewhere north of that because of the number of kids that were there. But we had a beautiful day. really big turnout. The park worked great. And then another special event that we hosted in April was the food truck. This, instead of Food Truck Fridays, this was Food Truck Thursdays at the Smart Financial Center Plaza. And so that was well attended, and the weather held up for those this time. Couple of more events. Oh, one more recap of the event was the Art of Wining and Dining held May 1st at Sugarland Town Square. I think that was well attended, a good event for the community. It's really, we're trying to build more of a variety from big events to smaller events, and then events that not only attract young kids, but also maybe, more mature adults to things. And so this is that type of event of brunch and having wine and adult beverages and things, but also still, chalk art and other things that would interest kids. So that was a nice event. Coming up, we've got another food truck series in June at Sugarland Memorial Park. This is the one where we usually have a DJ and then have the plaza there at Sugarland Memorial Park set up for the food truck event. And our traditional Memorial Day celebration will be held on Monday, May 30th at Sugarland Memorial Park. Got a good lineup of activities there. We're bringing some of the military vehicles in. The kids and people can interact with and see, and there's a flyover, and we'll have patriotic music and some speeches and recognitions at that event. And with that, that's what we've been up to. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from Joe? No? Well, appreciate the report. Great events. I mean, had a great time at all the events that that was presented. I have to say, it was just fantastic.
Always very organized.
So appreciate the staff on all the hard work y'all do, especially getting up on the early weekends. And so thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, 5:30 at that art and dining event. That was well attended. That band was.
It rained out really quick, but it was over fast.
But the rain was perfect.
Yeah.
It
The rain was
drove
right at the end.
right at the end.
At the end, we're cooling off. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. So with that said, I will take motion to adjourn.
I will make a motion that we adjourn.
Joan, second.
I'll second.
Okay, Andy will second. With that said, thank you so much.